Find the place that tells a story that you identify with and ask people questions about it.
Every battle weekend, they were here. I talked my partner into having a fake wedding probably 5 or 6 times here.
Places like this are great places to just start conversations.
You can make something that's dry on paper come to life.
What's really remarkable about this site is the degree to which the people of Stoney Creek are still heavily invested in it.
For 40 years, the Battle of Stoney Creek 1812 reenactment has been a chance to witness history in action, where past, present, and future are one and the same.
They put on reenactment every year, and thousands and thousands of people show up, and for some people it is part of the summer in Stoney Creek. And that just doesn't happen on a lot of sites.
I think that children should have an opportunity to engage in history in a way other than reading it in a textbook. And that's the great thing about coming to a museum, is that they can have hands-on activities. It's not just sitting there listening to facts or reading a fact. When you're holding something, tasting something, trying something on, and being put in that situation, it becomes very real to you.
Museums are important to a community because they are a focus, a repository of ideas about the past and who we are today. And more, they're about the future as well. And that means being more inclusive and incorporating histories that have not necessarily been portrayed in the past.
History matters to the young and old, the newcomers, and the people who have lived on these lands for generations. History is just pages of a book until museums make it come to life.
The land on which this museum sits is quite large, and it goes right up to the escarpment. But you can connect with the Carolinian forest, you can connect with hiking trails, the Indigenous trails that existed going along the edge of the escarpment. There's so much in terms of the layers of Hamilton and Stoney Creek's history. Just the archaeology alone, having excavated here, finding Indigenous material, and almost right next to it, finding smoking pipes of early settlers. So the interpretation of this landscape in many different ways, including natural history, including geology, there's so much opportunity moving forward for this site that it's very exciting.
Living history, and specifically the Battle of Stoney Creek, is foundational to this community. So going way back to the battle itself, it was the first good news in 1813 for the British Army. It grows from there in stature, a glow around the battle itself. In the middle of the 19th century, the woman who would later lead the charge to making this building a museum and the building of the 1913 Centennial Monument, Sarah Calder, she was born.
Sarah Calder is this really remarkable woman. She's part of a small group of what we would now call the first wave feminists. Women who were of some means, had to go out and do and make a mark. Well, there are only certain ways in the 1890s that women like that were allowed to make their mark. So many of these women became involved in the beginning of the heritage movement or the cultural movement. Sarah Calder, of course, was related to the Gages where, all of this happened. And she decided that as a way to mark the importance of Canada as part of the British Empire, she was going to buy Battlefield and turn it into a monument to this battle and to the Gage family. So that's what she set out to do. And she would not be denied. She was a force of nature. You can put her beside other women like this, Clementina Fessenden, who started Dundurn National Historic, Janet Carnahan, who opened probably the first gallery museum in Ontario, down in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And these women were strong, and they had a big impact on their communities.
These grounds have hosted educational field trips, reenactments, binational conflict, Indigenous stewardship, community gatherings, royal visits, picnics, dignitaries, hunting, fishing, and agriculture.
There's a lot of different parts of the site. So there's, of course, the Evils Among Us sculpture. As you come into the property, there's walking trails, there's beautiful scenery, there's the monument, which is a commemoration to the Battle of Stoney Creek, of course. There's Gage House itself, which is the Historic House Museum. There's the Nash Jackson House, which is more of the administrative side of things. There's picnic pavilions. This property can be enjoyed in so many different ways, and that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, because of course there is Battle Weekend, and there is school programming, and there is Apple Festival, and there is public tours of the house day to day. There's so many different things to do here, and it can be used in so many different ways by so many different people. This is an opportunity for people to experience the past and to learn about it in a unique way. Whether it's, you're a home cook and you really like cooking, well, watch us cook over the open fire. You care about fashion, we'll look at the fashions of the past and compare them to where we are today, because everything kind of repeats itself, And there is something for every age group too. When I first started volunteering here, I made my partner come with me, and he didn't think he was gonna get anything out of it, and he actually really started to enjoy it. There is so much for so many people. It's not just about, oh, it's a battle, oh, it's, old clothes. It's a little bit of everything for everyone.
Having a little kid hold your hand as you're walking from building to building on an educational tour, seeing the eyes light up on a girl as she's hitting a nail on a blacksmith forge. I can't get enough of it.
When you're in a role in a historic house like Battlefield House or like Dundurn Castle, and you're really interacting with people, it's amazing to see their interest, what they didn't know before, and kind of what they're getting out of it. They're in the house, and it's like, okay, this is a great big house, and it's a story of this family, but it's those personal stories and details and things that they actually get to do when they come into the house. So, today I'm gonna start a fire, I'm gonna use a flint and steel and show you how to do it. Or today I'm cooking over the hearth and I'm gonna bake this cake, and maybe you're gonna be able to try it while you're here. Or on a larger scale event, like a school program or Battle Weekend, you're watching me start a fire, you're watching a reenactor set up a tent, or you're watching somebody in costume all day, and it's that immersiveness that this seems real to me right now, and you really get to experience it as though you were there, as though you're a part of something, rather than just being talked at, because it's more of an experience than just this is what we're doing here today.
The most fun of the reenactment for me was walking around, seeing people doing sort of experimentation with the material culture, because that's when you get the best stuff from the reenactors. It's when they're talking about their tents and they're talking about the stuff, and the kids get the sights and the smells and the sounds, That's the part that sometimes inside a school classroom, no matter how good you make it, you're not going to be able to provide that intimacy and, awe in terms of the experience that they will have.
In talking with either reenactors who were soldiers or reenactors who were just like civilians, as well as the staff who worked at Battlefield, you're discovering what could you eat, what could you drink, what was popular in books, what's been invented, why is life so hard. You walked away that, oh, I know a little bit more about back then. Or maybe you just came because you liked the fact that it was a big dramatic show with fireworks at the end of it. There's little reasons and big reasons to show up.
The reenactment started in 1981 with a small group of volunteers who held a one-day event to honor those who had fought in the War of 1812. Despite rainy weather, they staged 2 short skirmishes on either side of the creek. Over the years, the event expanded to involve hundreds of volunteer reenactors from across Canada and the US, and thousands of people came to experience the event every year.
This is a very unique place, and it's one of the few that attracts the number of visitors for an event. And it really brings a different demographic of people into this community than are normally here.
And the reenactment was the big event every year, and it was a live action play. I mean, people marked it on the calendars. People, not just reenactors coming to fight in the battle, but local citizens wanted to watch it. But it was a huge effort, because you start planning months in advance, because you need to know firewood for everyone at a campsite. How much food are you going to need? The first aid and cording off roads, arranging for parking. It wasn't just, oh, we'll just all show up one weekend. So there was literally hours and hours and hours of paperwork involved just with the staff at this museum to make sure that everything ran smoothly. It's kind of you see a swan gliding along the surface, but the little fight underneath are paddling really fast. No one saw the paddling, they just saw the final smooth event. And so I think some people came just to watch, some people came to participate, and some people would be inspired by this reenactment to become a reenactor themselves, or learn about history, or maybe try to volunteer at the local museum because they just were inspired by what they saw. everyone helped everyone. In this battle, the Americans showed up knowing they're guaranteed to lose. It's an official fact. You can't win this battle, but people representing British soldiers will go to the American victories. So it was foregone conclusion. You knew who was going to win, and it was just showing, both sides are fighting for what they believed in, what was right, and so everyone got along. Everyone was happy. There's a trading post here, so people would swap things they didn't want anymore. I think one of the most unique things was actually the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Stoney Creek, because they had a ceremony at the end of the evening battle on the Saturday where a lot of volunteers, women, all came out with lanterns, and someone read off the roll call of all those who had been killed in battle, and it was a really quiet moment because it wasn't just gunpowder going off and cannon going off and then people falling over. It was actually acknowledging that these men on both sides lost their lives. It was moving.
We lose sight sometimes, but it was a ghastly business, and we have to keep that in mind. Impressing that upon children as well is terribly important. So yes, the impressing with a kind of ooh, look at the flash bang, but you also want to make them understand that this isn't, a happy thing. This is a very miserable and sad and dangerous thing.
One of the stories that's really important is that James Gage, the owner of the house, was a storekeeper. And so as part of their seasonal round, the Indigenous peoples, like the Mississauga, would have come through perhaps with sugar to trade with James Gage, or with furs, or they would have simply stopped by to buy from James Gage, and they would have camped on the landscape itself. So things were more fluid. There was a welcoming aspect to Indigenous peoples on the landscape. This early settler society mixed with Indigenous society was sharply interrupted in June of 1813. And so then you've got three separate sets of people on the site, all with different perceptions of what this place meant. So the British Army and the American Army, they're about defense. The Indigenous peoples are about the spiritual wilderness for thousands of years. The Gages are about prosperity. They're about building material prosperity in the picturesque landscape style.
During the War of 1812 and at the Battle of Stoney Creek, Six Nations warriors did what was needed to protect their homes and families. Fighting alongside the British had to do with the nation-to-nation relationship. The Six Nations as an independent nation joined in the surprising victory alongside them at Stoney Creek. To this day, the nation-to-nation relationship between the Crown and Six Nations remains complex.
This war split our people right in two, and it was a very fierce fight. A lot of blood was spilled on the ground, and so there had to be a reconciliation for that, not only between our people, but between the Americans and the British and then the Canadian residents. By having this piece of artwork put up here, it's a great step forward on respecting the Aboriginal people that live here in the Hamilton area, people at Six Nations, and all of the Native people really across Ontario who participated in this. So everybody will see a part of them in this, and I think that's what's really important.
This one had an attraction mainly by its theme, healing and reconciliation. Most of the other projects or artists that I talked to were dealing with the military history and the conflict, but the healing and reconciliation, it just intrigued me. And I'm so thankful for that theme, because it just gave me a whole different direction to go in.
Eagles Among Us is such a wide and varied set of messages for everyone.
It needs to be something that people can walk around for sure, but also they're invited inside of this work. They're invited to be part of the artwork. They're invited to be part of the energy.
Wampum belts are like historic documents. A leader would hold up or display a wampum belt while orally telling the story of an important event.
The wampum belts are there, and they speak definitely to the commitments that were made between Indigenous nations and non-Indigenous nations. So that all needs to be studied, and there's not always one understanding that we get from that. You can read it, I can read it, we'll come away with different points of view on it, and that's where the discussion begins.
So you can walk that medicine wheel from birth to the wisdom of old age. And you can see it as working through any given problem that you have in your daily life. Or you can look at it completely differently and you can examine what's on each eagle.
This piece of artwork could be a healing between our people, that if we suspend maybe some old prejudices and some old points of view and begin to look anew at what it means to be Native, to be Canadian, to be from Hamilton, because this is a very profound place. And we're creating something that's going to be there for a long time. It's going to outlive all of us, as maybe eagles should. We've created something that's bigger than all of us, and I think that's really important to acknowledge.
I think, places like this are great places to just start conversations, and open up dialogue and, start, utilizing that we have this agreement called the Two-Row Wampum, and it's about how Indigenous people and settlers can work together, and can both flow down the river side by side.
Originally, 950,000 acres were set aside for the Haldimand Tract. Today, approximately 48,000 acres remain.
The song is about the Haldimand Treaty, which is just a promise that was made to the Mohawks as far as their land title rights. And it's still something that, Kanien'kehá:ka people are still fighting for, even though these treaties were signed and these wars were fought, the Mohawk people are still not getting what this treaty said that they would get, so my song is kind of just pays homage to that, and it has that, the power of that discontent in the song. Sego, Skanagoga, Logan Stats Young Gets, and now want to need get to Doden Kanien'kehá:ka. Niwu Gotwin Jordan, Asuedo, Nidu Gredo. My name is Logan Stotts, and I'm Mohawk from Six Nations of the Grand River, a singer-songwriter and a storyteller, and this song's called 6 Miles.
Cancer through the lead, can't watch red blood up a white man's head. No, you can't. Try to make your people understand. That's why they call it homie native land. Homie native land. Give it all back, just to take it away. Take it away, give it all back, just to take it away. Don't you take it away. Six miles each side of the river, 6 miles each side of the river, sending shivers down your spine. I'm just asking for what's mine. 6 miles each side of the river, 6 miles each side of the river. You're the river. Here comes the rain, and it's made from our grandmother's tears. They watch the water, they watch the daughters disappear. They watch the water, they watch the daughter disappear. Give it all back, just to take it away. Take it away, give it all back, just to take it away. Take it away. 6 miles each side of the river, 6 miles each side of the river, sending shivers down your spine. I'm just asking for what's mine. 6 miles inside of the river, 6 miles inside of the river, 6 miles inside of the river. Give it all back just to take it away, take it away. And don't you take it away, don't you take it away. And don't you take it away, don't you take it away. 6 miles inside of the river, 6 miles inside of the river, 6 miles inside of the river. You're the river, you're the river. 6 miles inside of the river, 6 miles inside of the river, 6 miles inside of the river. We have this agreement called the Two-Row Wampum, and it's about how Indigenous people and settlers can work together, and can both flow down the river side by side. And I think, places like this, museums and educational places like this are the perfect spots to kind of open up that dialogue and that conversation.
A living museum is not confined to 4 walls, but surrounded by land and sky. Over the course of the last 40 years, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears have been expended, as well as tens of thousands of volunteer hours to make the reenactment of the Battle of Stoney Creek a reality.
People who work here really enjoy interacting with people. This is a great job. You get paid to talk. You get paid to read about history and then talk about what you've been reading, and I read and talk for free. So the fact that I found a job where I get paid to read and talk about what I'm reading, that's a great job. So people love being entertained, and you can make something that's dry on paper come to life.
It feels like you're a part of something. And I think that's why so many people keep doing this year after year, or travel all over Canada and the States to do it, because they really enjoy this kind of experience. And I know for me, I was just lucky to be able to work here and keep coming back as a volunteer. So it's really something that kind of, it means a lot to me in that respect.
I think everybody should find the museum that is their museum. Find the place in their community that speaks to them, that has their ideas in mind. I mean, just find the place that tells a story that you identify with and ask people questions about it, and take your kids there and do it.
This is an amazing site, possibly because it's the first historic site built in Ontario. It's really, really old as these things go. And so it started out as this kind of, very kind of twee, Victorian, period rooms and stuff like that. And then because it became engaged with the community, because it matters to the people of Stoney Creek and has for 100 years, it grew with the community. And so the interpretation, the stories that were being told, grew with the community. And, the strength of any historic house in the long term is that it matters to the community. If it matters to the community, it will never fail. It will grow, it will change, it'll evolve, but the community will always be there to support it.
Museums ensure these stories and the voices of all who played a part will stand the test of time. Our shared heritage matters.